Thresholds, the next installment in our pattern series. We're going to look at what I consider to be a super critical foundation drill, although it's something I don't usually introduce to people in classes until they're fairly experienced, because most people don't have the patience for this. So let me explain for those who are new to nosework what a threshold is. And this may be useful for some more experienced people who, without trying to have different definitions of threshold, so we're all on the same page. The threshold, by my definition, is the first part of a search area the dog searches. Okay, so in a lot of people get confused because there will often be a start line, say at the doorway here, right? And this doorway in architecture is called a threshold, right? So the threshold is obviously the doorway, right? Well, no, not exactly, not in nosework. A threshold exists in every search area. So for example, let's imagine I have 3 strange circular cars, right? And a start line over here. Is my threshold here, the start line? Or is my threshold the first part of the car the dog searches here? Okay, that's my threshold. So thresholds can be big or small depending on the dog. So for instance, really fast driving dogs who blow past the threshold, right? Because what we'd like is for the threshold to be inside this door right here. This is our threshold, okay? This. Some dogs, their threshold is all the way out here. Okay, they run that far or out into the center of the room, and this is their threshold. This is the first part of the search area the dog searched, which means if there was a hide here, the dog would run past it. Okay, and I want my dog to immediately start detailing when they get into a room, and I do that through hide placement. I'm trying to create this area here to be the most productive area in a search. Okay. I chose to demonstrate this exercise with our dog Icy. She's our youngest dog. She's our Malinois. The reason I chose her is because we haven't done this before with her. She is not experienced in thresholds. She is very driven and she'll blast past thresholds. We thought she would demo how to do this really well because I hear a lot of things from other people about how they're approaching their threshold problem. And what they're doing is they're holding the dog back at the threshold for extended periods of time. They're pointing to the threshold with their hand or telling the dog to search the threshold. I think when you do that, you're tapping into opposition reflex. When you pull back, what does the dog want to do? They want to lunge forward. Okay? I think they're actually encouraging the dog to run past the threshold. Now, will that work eventually? Yes, it will. But I don't think it works as quickly or as effectively as what I'm going to show you here, which is to put the responsibility on the dog to get the threshold, not on the human. It is totally 100% the dog's job, and it's our job to screw them up so they learn to get better at their job. I think when you look at dogs hunting, and I learned this a lot from when I did herding, there are roles that members of a pack will have. So let's say these are, let's say we have our sheep over here, right? So if I walk towards the sheep, or if one wolf walks towards this group of moose or bison or whatever, right? The other wolves will say, okay, he's going in, I'm gonna go around so that we pinch them, okay? If I cleared my sheep. Here are my sheep again. If I go around this way, the dogs, they're going around. I'll either meet them on the other side or I'll go in, okay? So in other words, there are established hunting roles that are like locked inside of our dog's genetic code. And I think you can tap into that. So if it's the dog's job to check the threshold, then it's not the handler's job. You both have separate roles. If you check the threshold, if you do this, the dog rushes in. And I really believe that fits into, if you come in, the dog will check. If you check, the dog will come in, okay? And so I think, obviously, I think that should be the dog's responsibility to do that. So how are we gonna do this? What we're gonna do to begin with is we're gonna start with a blank search, and we do that for several reasons. The first is I want you to see her baseline threshold search. What does her threshold search look like without any help? And the second is I want to, and some of you may immediately shut down when you hear this, but listen past. I'm using the scientific. I want to punish her for skipping the threshold. And the way I'm going to punish her is not by giving her some kind of leash correction or some stupid thing like that. I'm going to punish her by putting a hide at the threshold when she leaves it, so that she searches the whole room and thinking she checked the threshold. And then when she gets back to the threshold, she goes, what? There was not a hide here when I first came into the room. And so it's not a punishment in the dog training sense. It's a punishment in the sense that I'm exploiting something she did too quickly. She overdid, okay? So Natalie's going to come up to the threshold and she's going to let her in. She's not going to hold her back or do anything like that. She's just going to get to the threshold and let her in. She's even going to do this off leash, okay? Now, is that the worst threshold? No. It wasn't the worst. I mean, she kind of went off this way, but it wasn't the best threshold. She didn't check anything with any amount of detail. She didn't go along the wall. She made an angle like this into the far corner, okay? That's a totally normal thing for a young dog to do. Now she's back here if you can't see. Now you see I'm sneaking in, and while she's in the far corner, I'm just going to plant a hide right there, okay? So our hide is right there, okay? So this is a very fun way for me to, and I use the word punish because it doesn't bother me, but you can use any word you want. I can cheat or mess with the dog when I'm watching them and I see them rounding a corner, skipping a threshold, skipping any area of the search area. I can sneakily drop a hide in that area and teach the dog why I shouldn't skip that area. And this is a great time. That's why I like using blank searches as a diagnostic tool. And there she goes, wow, how did that get there? So now she's got it in her mind. Okay, there was a hide here. Okay, that's important. And the biggest example I like to use is when you go to a park and your dog sees a squirrel in a bush. How long does it take for your dog to forget that there was a squirrel in that bush? You come back day after day after day, and the dog could never see a squirrel again, and they didn't get to catch the squirrel the first time, but they check that bush every day, right, for a long time. I want to create squirrels in the threshold so that the dog checks that threshold repeatedly. Now, an odor is not as valuable as a squirrel, so it means I have to do it more often than I would. If I actually put a squirrel there, my dog would be ruined for thresholds because they'd check thresholds for squirrels every single time, right? So anyways, now I'm going to move the hide, and it's going to be, basically all the hides are going to be in this area. There's hide, and she's going to come up on leash and let the dog. Now it's all on leash, not so that she can restrain the dog, but just because the leash, well, first off, it's a safety thing. Actually, there's a road right here, and even though it's safe and she's not going to go anywhere, we wanted to keep her on leash for the most part. But the second thing is, it's good to practice leash handling. Now, if you're doing this with beginning students, don't add leash handling and thresholds at the same time if you can avoid it. It's better to do this off leash. Otherwise, the handler is going to try to pull them, or they're going to pull them on accident, and that's not what we want. We want the dog to be free to search. The only thing that I would have done differently, and I tell her, Natalie, this, is don't come in the room. Stay at the doorway and let the dog do it without you. And so you can see they run past, but what does she do? Instead of running out to the center of the room, she comes back to the threshold on her own. Now that's for two reasons. One, it's because we tricked her the last time, right? And second thing is because there's an odor there this time and she can smell that. And there it is. Okay, so it's still not my perfect threshold because she ran all the way out to here before she started detailing. So we're moving it again, and you can see I'm keeping it in the same general area. Now it's over here. It's a little higher. And now he's going to do the same thing. The only thing is she's going to stay on the outside of the door. And that cone between her feet is there to let her know where I want her to stand, which is right up against the door. Another mistake people make when they're doing thresholds is they start the dog further and further and further back away from the threshold, hoping that by the time the dog gets to the threshold, the dog will start searching. But the problem is you're teaching the dog to run further and further before they start searching. I want my dog to start searching immediately after I say search. That means I start them right at the edge of the search area. Now I might do something different as a trial, but in training, I want my dog to know the hide could be right in front of me when I start. You'd be amazed how many dogs just rush past thresholds. And some of you know this because you have dogs that do this. Beautiful. See, now that is a beautiful threshold. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to have Natalie move away from the door, but not to get further away from the door. I'm going to have her move to the next cone, and then the next cone, and then the next cone. And the reason is I want the dog to wrap this corner tighter and tighter and tighter, and to make a tighter turn. So it costs the dog more energy to check the threshold. So you're going to see, oh, I guess she's going back to number 1. See the difference? And this is what I want to see, is a dog who strains all the way up to the doorway, and when you release the leash, it's almost like they fall into the ground, right? Because they're not driving to the center of the room anymore. They're driving to the threshold. And I tell the dog where the threshold is by where I stop, okay? So you see the nice tight wrap. And there she finds it. And so now she goes 1 step back. Or 1 cone back. And I'm showing you like several different exercises. So the first exercise of just staying at the threshold, we could do that 3 or 4 or 5 times before we move to moving to each cone. This would be a more advanced exercise when I'm ready to refine. And Natalie was waiting for me to tell her when to come in and reward because she was staying at this cone. And now we're going to move to the last cone. And then we're going to up the ante 1 more time. And you can see, you can create a very interesting search area just in this small space. You don't have to set hides all in the environment. You can just do a whole bunch of hides right here. And look, she's even checking the outside of the threshold. That's beautiful. We have completely changed this dog's expectations about this room. Okay, so now we're upping the ante. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to try to bait her into running through the threshold. And we're going to bait her with different distractions. So the first distraction we're going to do is I'm going to call her into the room from outside of the room. So first I'm going to stand here, and then I figure out the camera can see me better from over here. And you'll see that we trick her again, right? So there I am kneeling on the ground, and I'm calling her and patting my legs, trying to get her all excited. And she comes to me after checking the threshold, which is good, but not long enough to catch the hide. Now that was it. It's okay for the dog to make a mistake, and I'm definitely not upset about that. I think the dog needs to make a few mistakes to figure out what their job is. But I could have done something different. I could have set an easier hide, one that I knew she would put her nose on before for the first round, so that she gets a hide and ignores the distraction, gets rewarded for that. But it's okay in my mind that she makes a few errors and learns that it doesn't pay to come up to me, because I'm not actually going to pet her or give her treats or anything like that. Okay, doing it again. I've moved my position slightly, and I'm calling her again. And she checks the threshold again and then comes to me and then goes immediately right back. So what you can see is now we're creating a threshold that's more distracting than me. She really wants to come say hi to me, but she says, "Well, wait, there's a hide at the threshold." You see? So I'm trying to make that threshold more distracting than any of the other distractions in the room, even though she really, really wants them. She's a really, really affection-motivated dog, right? So there I'm putting the hide just on the ground, which is a great thing to do, not always on an object. I'm calling her again. Let's see what she does this time. And she's not restraining her at all. Beautiful. Okay, so she succeeded, so we're moving on. New distraction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a toy now. And I'm going to try to tease her with a toy. Oh, I'm distracting her with praise again. Sorry. So there it is. Let's see. But I set the hide that's harder. So this hide would be considered a really hard threshold for me, and I'm distracting her. And so that's like a really, really great run. I'm really happy about that. So there, I'm going to put a toy. So that's a toy on the ground. It's a nice tug. This dog is very toy motivated, even though Natalie's rewarding her with food at the moment. and she didn't even notice the toy, which is wonderful. Because she's so invested in checking that threshold that she doesn't even see that there's a distraction here, which is a secret to distraction training, is making your dog so driven for odor that they can't even see the distraction. It doesn't even register for them. So just to make it more obvious, I'm putting the toy right there at the threshold with the hide. So here's hide, here's toy. And again, nothing. So now I'm gonna pick up the toy and start teasing her with it. Okay, and we're making the hide a little deeper into the threshold, right? And you can see even a couple of inches makes a huge difference to the dog. And going up and down makes it different too. And this would be the refining stage of the threshold. I wouldn't do it this way with a beginner dog who's just learning the threshold. In fact, I usually no attention to the toy. And this dog is very toy motivated. You'll see in a second when we switch to toy reward. With a beginning dog, usually I attach the threshold to the rest of the search. So I'd be going further down because I want my dog to do threshold and the rest of the room. And then this would be, these exercises I'm showing you would be for advanced students. So now, this is another test. It's a blank search. Okay? And we're gonna see what did we teach the dog. Okay? So you can see a huge change in behavior compared to the blank search we did at the beginning. Is this done? Is she learned her thresholds? No, she hasn't. She needs to have this done in a variety of new locations over and over again until it becomes a permanent feature of her searching. But when I go to a new location, that's one of the first things I do. At first I do it blank so that my dog gets accustomed to the area. Then I start working on the deficiencies. So does she need threshold? Does she need a corner? And you can see once she decides there's nothing here, she skirts past really fast, right? So we need to work these long walls. We need to do all that, and that'll be later. This, if you watch the patterns one and the single line video, that's what I would do for that wall. And now she's worked her way all the way around the room and come back to the threshold. And she's come back to the threshold on her own this time, as opposed to Natalie bringing her back, and we reward her with toy. And she's very happy and is annoyed that she got lied to again, that it was at the threshold the whole time, even though she checked it so well, which I really want her to doubt herself. That I want her to think, even if I've checked it 100 times, it could show up there. It could just be a really weird hide that disappears. Because guess what? I've been to trials where they are really weird hides and they disappear. So I never want my dog to give up a search and say, I found everything. When my dog tells me it's blank or there's nothing more, I think they've given up. I want my dog to keep searching for a harder hide and never ever stop. So that is the key to all of this. And I hope that you get an idea for threshold. So now your challenge is to show me, do this exercise and show off your thresholds. What distraction can your dog ignore that you take a video of it, you coming doing the threshold, and the dog does a beautiful threshold no matter what you're doing. And one of the distractions I didn't show in this video that I don't know how it slipped my mind was the owner rushing through the threshold trying to race the dog through and the dog checking the threshold anyways. But that's basically just doing the running drill, but with the doorway instead of a row of boxes. So if you haven't seen the running drill, look it up. It's one of the exercises we have on Patreon. So thank you guys for being our patrons. Thanks for watching this. This is one of my favorite lessons to do with my own dogs. It helps that they're really driven and want to rush in, and then we like to throw them some curveballs all the time. So I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing your challenge videos as to what you're able to produce. Well done, guys.